Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Show off that body. Oh yeah. Malik been in the gym. All right. Welcome all our faithful and loyal viewers to 2Brothers podcast. My name is Vincent Lovett, here with my ever faithful companion, Mr. Malik. How y'all doing? Look at him.
Yeah, we're doing good. You know, I got the Nationals jersey on. Hold on, wait. What does that say? You can't really read it this way, but it says World Series 2019. Just
The Dodgers gonna get one too. They gonna have a whole brand new one. Can't wait for that to happen.
if this year happens, which is a great way to start off this podcast. I've been hearing a bunch of rumors about baseball supposed to return by July. Then they said, baseball might even get pushed up to June 1st. From what I've been looking at and from the reports that I've been reading, at least June is a lie because there's way too many things going on in the community, in the MLB community, amongst the front office and the owners and the players that has to be sorted out first before they can get to any real start to a season. So what they have to do is, from a video that we just previously saw, they have to when they want to start back up. I don't know why I can't get these words out. They have to do up to 10,000 coronavirus testing amongst the entire league. So 10,000 people have to get tested. Then they want to go to the next step, which is how can we have an in-game social distancing? So there's not going to be any fans, but they still want the players and the umpires, and they still want to be able to have a proper amount of social distancing, which is 6 feet within the dugouts and within the outfield and between everybody that has to be there to be able to run a game effectively and efficiently.
Right. I feel like the biggest issue with that is the outfield won't be an issue because they're already spread out. But instead, think of like how the catcher, the umpire, and the batter are all so close together. Then when you run around a base, first or third, they are generally within like arm's reach of each other, usually. So that could be another possible issue with that. At least that's how I see that coming.
Yeah, it's that. And then another issue is the owners want to do a rollback on that financial payment due to them losing so much money on not being able to play as of up until this point. And the players don't want a financial rollback, and the players want to be able to still get their money and still be able to get paid what they're guaranteed on time, but not like, of course, whatever they're guaranteed fully without having to actually play. So if you get suspended and you still have a contract, the players still want to be able to be paid for that amount of time up until this point. So that'll be interesting to see how that works out. And then also all of the rosters are on lock. So once they open up the rosters, will teams start trading players away to get rid of debt? Will teams start trading to get more assets so they can build up because they may not have lost a whole lot of debt due to the whole pandemic crisis? We don't know. We'll see. It's kind of, I don't want to say it's interesting. It's really stressful if you're a baseball fan because it doesn't look like there's going to be a return, at least within the next few weeks. I'm going to give it about a month or so.
Yeah, because as of right now, every sport is losing besides UFC. They seem to be the main winners from this, especially from last weekend's UFC fight card.
You want to talk about that? I don't really know too much about UFC, so this could be your subject. You can.
I only saw 2 fights, so no. All in all, UFC will be the head front of sports until I would say until late July. That's how I feel. How the next major sports like baseball, basketball, football, that's probably gonna take a while for them to even come back into the forefront.
As far as the NBA goes, I can just read off the recent report. The NBA does not have to make a decision on restarting the season as May turns into June. Adam Silver said he would address players' concerns and feelings pressured by teams to return to volunteer workouts at facilities. Silver hopes to have a traditional postseason that includes 7-game series in each round, though the possibility of alternatives remain. Orlando and Vegas lead the prospective bubble sites. There is a possibility of no fans in arenas next year, depending on the development of the vaccine. Silver and the collective bargaining agreement wasn't built for an extended pandemic. Silver suggests that prospective return to play training camps, respective turn to play training camps should be a minimum of 3 weeks. And that was the latest as of May 8th. So,
well, here's the first thing I thought of. If it's right back to sports, they're gonna be somewhere hot. Is either Arizona. That's kind of what I thought it was gonna be, either Arizona or Florida. You know, somewhere hot where the COVID-19 can't really spread or flourish. But that just overpopulate those states, because you're gonna have every sport there, or at least on each side of the country, eastern or western side.
Which is very interesting because in Vegas has opened up a lot of its like local businesses and opened up just certain areas, and they're doing like that slow roll, such as Texas has done it, Georgia's done it with the whole, we're on a decline for this pandemic, so let's slow roll some of these businesses and streams of revenue back up. But none of the casinos are open on the Strip. And if none of the casinos are open on the Strip, that also means
the betting
of the hotels aren't open on the Strip. So if you want to have Vegas as a hot spot for the potential rest of the regular season, or if they just want to cut the regular season off, because it doesn't really say in the report, but if you want to just cut the rest of the regular season, start up with a training camp in said facilities, and then do that 3-week training camp starting, I don't know, this upcoming weekend, Memorial Day weekend. And then from there, get straight into the playoffs, which would start in late June into July, and then probably wrap up in August. That would kind of mean that you got to house these people in these big populated areas, such as Vegas and Orlando. But if none of the hotels are open on the Strip, what are you going to do? How are you going to have the whole Western Conference of 8 teams be in Vegas and the whole East be in Orlando? I'm not sure about Orlando, but I know Vegas. This is just from me having people and knowing people in Vegas. None of that stuff is open. So where are you going to house these players? Where are you going to house these team managers, the team doctors? Because, you know, they still have to be testing and have to go through a rigorous amount of protection to be able to still have this playoffs happen. So I don't know. It's interesting.
Right. You also got to think about, like, if you're going to have them in hotels and stuff, you also got to have the cleaning people tested as well to make sure they don't spread the disease. You got to make sure what's called bellhop, the chefs, the workers inside these hotels as well, on top of your already players and coaches. And that's just adding on more and more to the entire process right there.
Yeah, I think it's kind of strenuous. Like, I understand we want sports back as avid sports watchers and athletes and players and all of that, but at the same time, it's a lot that has to go into it, and it's a lot of other people's health risks that we have to take into account besides just the actual athletes. Like you said, the bellhops, the people who run the day-to-day operations within the hotel, they don't have as good as medical health or Medicare or whatever you want to say. They don't have that type of stuff that these professionals and these people with money have. So, like, you got to give them some sort of plan and some sort of rollout to say, hey, while we're doing this and while you're at risk, anything that happens to you or happens to your family, we got to cover it. And I'm not sure if they're willing to take that risk, but it's a necessary risk that they have to take if they want to do these hot spots to be able to continue the season.
Shoot, if you even pay attention to what's going on in New York, how the certain cases of COVID-19 has been like mutated as such, because they opened up a little too early. There was also a case in Atlanta, Georgia, that people the disease didn't mutate, but they open up their businesses a little too early as well. So the whole point I'm trying to get across is, should we wait? Should we wait a little longer, or do you think that if the risk outweighs the reward outweighs the risk in this case?
If we're going off of my personal take, I think they're opening up things way too soon, but I think it's strictly due to financial reasons. Nobody was prepared for this type of loss. This is the biggest loss that we've seen in the world in a really long time, since I don't even know if the Spanish flu in the 1800s has seen this. I mean, the Spanish flu had more deaths, don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to make it seem like that pandemic back in the day isn't as important, because there's been a lot of other pandemics before this one, but financially, we've been in the biggest financial debt or crisis that we've seen as a world in a really long time. So they're opening up all this stuff, just to get some sort of money flowing in, some sort of financial homeostasis, but it's not working because, as you said, the virus hasn't really, there's no real stronghold on the virus as a whole in these areas. You as a city or you as a state may have seen a slight flattening of the curve, but that doesn't mean that people aren't going to try to move there. There's not an influx in other surrounding areas.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just going to travel and take heed wherever is open and just get worse. So I think that we shouldn't be opening up things so soon. I think that we should still try to focus all of our energy on trying to find a cure and find a vaccine for it. But, this is way too much political talk coming out of my mouth.
Can't argue with that. If my 2 cents mean anything, I would just say we shouldn't bring back sports. We shouldn't try to normalize what's going on right now. Granted, I do miss playing sports. I do miss playing football. I do miss watching football. Granted, I can watch the old highlights or old games from back in the day, but at this point in time, this will be like playoffs. This will be finals for NBA. This will be stuff is getting. This will be stuff is being like we really must watch TV. It will be happening right now. Now it don't. I could say a number of teams who will be competing right now, has a good chance of winning, but we can't watch that. I do believe that we should look for a vaccine. We should spend most of our money on that, but I ain't the policy maker. I ain't a figurehead. I ain't got millions of dollars. I'm still living at mom's for right now. So until the cash flow comes back, I think we should just work on that vaccine and keep everybody safe.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Mm-hmm.
I'm at mom's house as well, but I still have my apartment in LA, and the whole, your fall semester is going to be online. It's it's taking a toll on me. I'm still trying to work things out, get things decided, but I mean, who knows? So,
right.
As we enter into the NFL and the Rooney Rule. So what the Rooney Rule was originally was NFL teams had to interview at least one candidate for one minority candidate for a head coaching position. And that's what the Rooney Rule was. And so the NFL is actually meeting today, and what they're doing, it's an owners meeting. I'm guessing they're going to meet via Zoom. I don't know how exactly they're meeting, but they're going to meet today. The owners and the NFL front office and the commissioner are going to meet, and they're going to discuss the new rule of the Rooney Rule. So what the new implement of the Rooney Rule was, NFL teams have to interview 2 candidates for a head coaching position, 1 candidate for a GM position, 1 for an NFL front office position, such as the president of the club. And it's not just minority, it's minority and or female. So they have to interview minority and or female for all of these positions. and then another for coordinator positions, so offensive, defensive, and special teams coordinator. And with that, there's a quote unquote incentive that has been put into place, which is really just the slap in the face. So before I go into my personal feelings, what the incentive is, if an NFL team hires a coordinator, or if NFL team hires a head coach, a coordinator, anybody in any of these positions that is a minority, depending on who they hire, they get a bump. So if they hire, let's say, a minority as a head coach, they get a bump in the third round. The bump in the third round will go from, we'll get a jump in 6 spots. So if I hire, so let's say let's just take my team. I'm the Philadelphia Eagles. We do good this upcoming season, and we make the divisional round. So in the third round, I don't know exactly, but let's say we have the 16th pick in the third round, right? Or actually, no, we do good, then we would have like the late 20th pick. So let's say we have the 26th pick in the third round, not the 16th. We have the 26th pick in the third round. If we hire, and we fire our head coach and we hire a minority as our head coach. Let's say we get rid of our head coach and we hire Eric Bieniemy as our new head coach, who's the offensive coordinator from the Kansas City Chiefs. We now go from the 26th pick to the 20th pick. You know what I'm saying? And let's say we fire our general manager and we hire another minority as the general manager as well. So we hire 2 minorities as the new head coach and general manager. Instead of us moving up 6 spots, we move up 16 spots if you hire both in the same year. If you just hire the general manager, you move up 10 spots. Head coach, 6 spots. General manager, 10 spots. You do them both together as like a package deal, you move up 16 spots. And then as far as the 4th round is concerned, if you have a minority in that position as a head coach or as a GM for up to 3 seasons, you get a move up in the 4th round as well. You get to leap up 6 spots in the 4th round. Same thing with the 5th round. If you hire a minority as such as like a player personnel or an assistant or whatever, you get a bump up in your draft pick in the 5th round as well.
You have to hire them. You can't just like ask them a job interview, so to speak. It have to be
a job interview. You have to hire them. If you hire them, the incentive is you get a boost in your draft stock in the 3rd, 4th, or 5th round, depending on who you hire, how long they've been already hired, and where everything falls out. So the reason why they're doing this is because the Rooney Rule didn't really have any real impact. Because as far as the head coaching positions are concerned, for the last 20 head coaching positions that have been up and available for grabs, only 3 of those have been minorities. So out of 32 teams and out of however many seasons there's been a new head coaching position available, only 3 of those positions that have been filled up until this point has been a minority.
Previous year, right?
From any previous years. Just previous years in general. What else was there? And I'm trying to think. You can go and start talking about how you feel up until that point as I gather my thoughts.
Here's one of the things that clicked in my head. Like certain teams could just hire a minority for 1 year. Then after that 1 year, after they got their incentive, so to speak, that bump up in the draft stock, they could just fire said personnel, fire said head coach or staff member, and get a whole new one and just repeat the whole process all over again. You would see like a whole bunch of minorities or females having 1 year contract to fit said stint for each team.
Which is why the 4th round incentive is put into place, because they want them to have them hired for at least 3 seasons, which is why you get an incentive in the 4th round if they're able to have a contract that lasts or be able to stay within that contract up to 3 seasons. Another thing that was that they're going to agree on that's going to get put into play And it's probably one of the only things that I actually agree with, which is why I was having a brain fart and couldn't remember. But it is NFL teams can't block an assistant coach from being, or assistant coach or assistant person on the personnel staff from interviewing for other coordinator positions.
Oh, okay.
You know how like the NFL likes to hire their head coaches from previous coordinators.
Mm-hmm. Like they fall underneath that Belichick tree, for example.
Exactly. So NFL teams, as of previously, would be able to block. So for teams such as Bill Belichick and the New England Patriots, if he had let's say a player personnel, somebody, I don't know, just somebody within their coaching tree, player personnel, or prime example, the quarterback coach. Quarterback coach is not a position coach. It's not a coordinator. Mm-hmm. But he likes his quarterback coach, and he wants to make his quarterback coach his own coordinator later, just not right now. He's going to block him, and the also ownership would block that quarterback coach from going out and seeking offensive coordinator jobs on other teams. Now, the new rule that they're voting on and that they're ironing out the deals on today is saying, hey, you can't do that. That's not fair, because you're not allowing him to advance his career within the NFL, because he can't go and get a coordinator position, and from being a coordinator, because you are blocking him from being a coordinator, now he can't be a head coach, and he's stuck at being a quarterback coach.
Well, at least until his contract is up.
And exactly, at least until his contract is up. And then it's he say, she say after that. But I think the whole thing is kind of disrespectful, because you're not looking at minority coaches as what they are. You're not looking at them as being an actual viable coach and actually know what they're doing. Now it's, like I said earlier, it's a slap in the face, because you're only looking at them as a quote unquote meal ticket. You're only looking at them as an asset, so I can get better draft picks, or I can get a better position or better leverage in the draft. So let's say like certain teams, I can hire you as my coach or as my GM or whatever, because you're a minority. I can jump up in the draft, and I can use the fact that I jumped up in the draft and then trade for someone else.
Right.
I'm not even considered a coach, a GM, a president of operations. I'm not considered none of that anymore. And for the future of minority coaches being hired and or female coaches being hired, are they being hired because of this new Rooney Rule, or are they being hired because of their track record and because they deserve a job?
That's what I was about to get across. You know, you can end up hiring somebody hire a new GM, minority or female, and they end up completely dropping the ball, and your team goes 0-16, just because you thought of hiring a minority would help your draft stock. Now, naturally, it would. You may end up getting the first pick because you went 0-16, but the fact that you may have lost a whole fan base because you thought this was a good idea. Tank for Trevor is gonna be coming up pretty quick, and that will be the horrible way to do it.
Yeah, I think it's like prime example. I've been talking about this with you and with other people. What I found was an ultimate sign of disrespect is Coach Eric Bieniemy, like I was just said earlier, for the Kansas City Chiefs. He's been with the Kansas City Chiefs since 2013. Him and Doug Peterson, who is now the Eagles head coach, has been with the been with the Kansas City Chiefs since 2013, and Eric Bieniemy was hired as a running back coach. Doug Peterson was the offensive coordinator. Doug Peterson leaves to go to the Eagles. Eric Bieniemy becomes the new offensive coordinator after Doug Peterson leaves in 2016 really. But anyway, from there, he has been the offensive coordinator. And we all know Andy Reid in crunch time calls the play calls and all of that, but at the same time, he's a valuable asset. He's a valuable piece.
Mm-hmm.
He's been valuable to Patrick Mahomes and valuable to Patrick Mahomes' whole development. So for him to not, with all the head coaching positions opening, so we had the Giants, we had the Carolina Panthers needed a head coach. Who else needed a head coach? Do you remember?
Last year, I remember No, Arizona had got their head coach. That's why they got Murray. Who else?
I'm trying to think. Either way, Eric Bieniemy didn't get a legitimate call or a legitimate look for these positions. And my whole gripe with the New York Giants was they hired Joe Judge as their head coach instead of giving the nod to Eric Bieniemy. I think is extremely disrespectful. I'm not saying that Joe Judge isn't qualified, but if you look at his track record, Joe Judge is not the offensive coordinator. My bad. He was the special teams coordinator for the New England Patriots. So you go with a special teams coordinator who hasn't really got a real coordinator position because special teams, I know it's a third. I know football's broken up into three aspects and 2/3 of what you need to do to actually win a game. And so I know it plays a valuable part, but it's not as important as such as an offensive coordinator or defensive coordinator. So I just think that it's really disrespectful. And when certain people asked the people who presented this new Rooney Rule, because it was done by a committee, two people that were on the committee were Ozzie Newsome, who was a former player and and a coach as well, and along with Tony Dungy. Tony Dungy was on the rule, but neither one of them wanted to speak on it because they haven't seen the final form of this whole proposal. So I'm pretty sure they didn't. I mean, I hope, they didn't come up with the whole incentive plan. I think the rule is really good if it didn't have an incentive plan behind it.
Right. Is that you giving the higher ups, the general managers, I believe. You're giving the general manager or the team owners, you're giving the team owners a reason to hire them outside of natural talent or actual deserving of the position. Mm-hmm. So I do see part on that. The 2020 season for Jacksonville, I would say the first game against Indianapolis Colts is going to be a key game for them since they're going to have to make sure Gardner Minshew's off to a good start for the foreseeable future, because their first two games are divisional games, and they'll kind of tell the story of how it's going to play out. Now, their first game is against the Colts in Indianapolis, so I really don't feel like Jacksonville will be able to get to a good start. But even in their second game against Tennessee, sorry, their first game is at Jacksonville, but I still don't see them coming out with the win in that one. Their second game against Tennessee, the Tennessee Titans at Tennessee, I don't see them winning that either. So it's all going to depend on how well they can get out to a fast start, because they're possibly looking at 0-2 going into Miami, and that's not going to that could be a good win for them. That could not be. But that's just going to push them further and further along the hole.
Yeah, I completely agree, because as you were talking about their first game at home versus the Colts, their second game versus the Tennessee Titans was a big outlier for me as well, because you got to go into Tennessee. You got to go into Tennessee, and you got to go into a team's home who not only made the playoffs out of your division, they ran the table and almost up until halftime versus the Kansas City Chiefs in the AFC Championship, they were doing pretty good because they were up on the Kansas City Chiefs before halftime started. So that going into that game, the Tennessee Titans are looking to reload. They're not looking to rebuild. They're looking to win now. And that's exactly what they did when they got their draft picks. Like, they're just Coach Vrabel, however you say his name, he's looking to win right now. And going into Tennessee and winning in their home is a big statement. And like you said, Gardner Minshew is going to start off with two really tough games. And I'm not saying that it gets easier, but at the same time, then he plays against the Dolphins. There's not just a rollover. It's not a pushover team. And then you got the Bengals in Cincinnati. So we just got to see how they start. If he gets off to a good start, and even if they do lose those first two games, it's a matter of how he lost those first two games as well. Did he get blown out, or was it a close game? Was it a close call? Did it come down to 10 points? A 10-point difference, especially for a second-year quarterback, I think really shows a tell in his development from year one to year two. Because I don't just look at their losses as a developing quarterback and as a young quarterback, such as him and or Drew Lock, as like, oh, they lost 6-7 games. It's like, okay, but did they lose those 7 games in the beginning of the season as they're still developing? Did they lose them by a 10-point margin? That all is tall tale signs to their future in the franchise. And will they stick with them in the future? I think another game for them is later on in the season. It's week 11 versus the Steelers at home. I think that might be a slip-up game because they're just coming off the Packers, then they have the Steelers, and then they have the Browns. So it's
Granted, those two are going to be home, the Steelers and the Brown game, and I will believe they match up a little bit. They match up they have a better matchup against the Browns stylistically. Now, Gardner Minshew is not going to outperform. I don't see him outperforming Baker Mayfield. He's looking for a better year as well. But as a whole, I do believe that the Browns defense will be able to mitigate the Jacksonville offense. And even with the game against the Steelers are way better defense than the Browns are collectively. So even if Gardner Minshew was to have a good game, like you mentioned earlier, if he has a good game and the team still loses by a slim margin, then they could consider that a victory moving forward into the future. Now it's going to show up as an L on their schedule and rankings, but if your quarterback for the future is getting better game by game, then when then at the end of the season you can say that we invested a lot of money and potential we invested a lot into this person's progression. So if he does what he's supposed to and gets better and doesn't fall under the sophomore slump, that how most QBs, matter of fact, are susceptible to falling under, then it'll be a plus. It'll look good, especially going into the draft, because you won't actually need to draft a quarterback. You have to have other holes you will need to fill.
Yeah. So I completely agree. So what do you think their record is going to be? Because I have them at 6-10 ending this season.
That's just how they finished last season, 6-10. I see them with a couple of departures, a lot of unhappy players as well, like Calais Campbell for staying in Jacksonville. I don't see them going 6-10. I see them more about 4-12.
4-12.
Right.
Yeah, they lost a lot of good pieces. They lost 2 of the league's best corners. They lost Jalen Ramsey and AJ Boye in 1 year. So it's really hard to replace them.
Right.
And then they also lost who else did they lose to that went to the Ravens? The defensive lineman.
I thought it was Calais Campbell, but or Ngakoue.
Yeah, okay, yeah, there you go. So it's just we got to see they're still in a rebuilding process. So I got to see how they do in a rebuilding process. So do you want to go to your team, the Colts, or do you want to
go to the best team in the mother division?
Okay, so we're talking about the Tennessee Titans. Cool. We can talk about the Colts. You can start. What's your key games, man? I know you looked at this schedule several times.
To be honest, I do see a lot of teams that potentially that can make or break the team. So the first one I can't wait to see will be the Vikings. That's going to be the week 2, and they're playing inside Indianapolis. Well, that's a luxury because you're not going to the cold. You're staying inside the dome. But the biggest question I want to see happen is, can this offense still attack at a high level? The Vikings is a good test solely because they're naturally a good defensive team. So they may have upgraded pieces on offense and they may have better players, but the fact that the head coach is mainly is heavy defense is why I still believe that if Phillip Rivers can do what he said he's going to do, if he can be the Phillip Rivers of old, not Phillip Rivers of last year, then it'll be a good tell going into the future how well the team's going to stack up against the other higher level teams in the AFC.
I'm sorry. Phillip Rivers as your quarterback is just funny.
Yeah, don't remind me, man. Don't remind me.
But I think another two key games are as they're trying to make a playoff run, and actually as they're not really gearing up for the playoffs, but in the middle of the playoff race. Week 15 and week 16. Week 15, they have versus the not Titans, the Houston Texans
at Tennessee.
And then week 16 at Pittsburgh for the Steelers. Those are two must-win games. You don't make the playoffs if you don't win those two games, bar none. It doesn't really matter to me because those two teams are going to be valuable teams in fighting for a playoff spot. So if you can beat those two teams, not only to help secure yourself a playoff spot, depending on how many wins you win previously, but also you gotta win those two games so you can get at least a wild card spot.
Right, and those are usually the teams that be fighting for the wild card spot as well. Since you're naturally going to have the Ravens, who I believe is going to be at the top of that top of their division, and then you also have to worry about the records that's going to pop up for the Tennessee. They're going to be viable they're going to be around 8 to 10 win games a season. So if you can knock out those two, you're generally making your wild card position a lot better. Now, naturally, you may end up having to play against the number 2 team or number 2 team, especially how everything changed up in this upcoming playoffs.
Yeah, because we got 7 teams in the playoffs now, not just 6.
Exactly. Now you're gonna have more teams make it, but you don't want to be that one team that plays against the quote unquote best team in the conference. It's gonna be an early exit for you. And that's not what I want the coach to do. I want the coach to make that deep playoff run.
Mm-hmm. Because it's not just we made the 7th spot now. We're in the playoffs instead of only 6 teams make it and the first 2 teams get a bye. Like, even though the second team doesn't get that bye anymore, they're still the second team in the conference for a reason.
Right.
So, like, even though they have to play in wild card week, don't get it twisted. Like, they still got to play, and they're still playing at home. Like, you still got to travel as that 17. You still got to travel to their home, play them in their home in a hostile wild card environment. And depending on how certain teams, how it all shakes out, they might feel like they got robbed as that second team. They might feel like they should have been number 1.
Right. So they're playing with much more to prove as well. It's not going to be no walk or cakewalk, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. So what do you think your record is going to be? I'll let you start off.
Okay. I do see the team progressing better, but compared to their 7-9 season with Philip Rivers as the QB, but I don't see it being too astronomical. Yeah, 9-7. I see them finishing.
I was thinking the exact same thing, actually. I was thinking 9-7. Going into the season with Philip Rivers, I think you're hopeful for a 10-win season.
Mm-hmm.
But 9-7, I think, is going to be.
And I mean, it is doable. There's not many teams that the Colts didn't beat last year. They matched up pretty well in the division. It's just going to be those outlier games. Like, you're going to have to play against the Vikings. You're going to have to play against the Ravens, the Packers. And that's really it. Those are really your the upper echelon teams in the opposite conference. Those are going to be the hardest teams to play against compared to the Jets and the Lions, which I believe it should be definitely wins for the Colts.
So do we want to go to the very next team in just how their actual division shaked out, or do we want to go to the top of the list team who really was kind of like an upset? You want to go to Houston?
You talking about the Texans then, I assume.
Yeah, I want to go to the Texans. Actually, you know what? Scratch that. We're gonna go to the Texans.
All right, let's hear it then. What key game do you think the Texans are gonna have to really focus on?
I mean, first 2 games of the season, they gotta go to Kansas City and win, and then they gotta go home after going to Kansas City and play the Ravens. You gotta play the 2 toughest teams in your whole conference. In all of the AFC, you gotta play the 2 toughest teams. week 1 and week 2. Not to mention, they lost their number 1 target for David Johnson.
That still was a power move. Somebody had to have. There had been some type of bad blood that spilled over with that trade. There's no reason why you would get rid of your number 1 receiver for just because of the way he didn't like how he acted or how he conducted his business.
And you not only traded him for that, you traded him for somebody that was a number 1 running back for 1 year and was popular in fantasy. If you play fantasy football, he was popular in fantasy football for 1 year.
Right. He's also an aging running back. You know, they don't really last that long.
I think the only running back that ages gracefully is Frank Gore, because Frank Gore just got another contract, and he's 36, I believe, somewhere roughly up there. I mean, not his exact age, but he's up there, and he's had a long career. And I believe, I'm not saying that he's going to go to the Hall of Fame, but
he got the stats. I mean, he got when he was this past season, he had just passed not the all-time leading record, but he had moved up in the rankings of that.
The all-time rankings, yeah. But anyway, we're on the Houston Texans, not Frank Gore. We'll get to Frank Gore later. But anyway, so those first 2 games are definitely valuable games, and then it comes down to the Tennessee Titans to me. And it just depends, are we talking Tennessee Titans week 17 at home, or are we talking the Titans earlier on in the season on week 6 in Tennessee? I don't want to put too much of the onus and too much of the key games in the beginning of the season because, teams are still trying to figure themselves out, figure out their play style offensively and defensively for that particular year. Because you can't use what you had last year because people change, personnel changes, people grow, develop, people might lose a step, whatever the case may be. So I think the Tennessee Titans week 17, because the way that their schedule looks, you got to win. You can't just win in the beginning and then slack off. You got to win all 16 games, bar none. You got to just win.
Exactly, because if anything has showed how last year turned out, how Indianapolis was basically leading the division for all the way up to, I believe, week 5, then fell off completely after having, I think it was 3 back-to-back losses, which is they ruined the season, knocked them out of the playoff race potentially. But if that's anything to say, teams can bounce back, and teams can also fall completely out of it as well. So I like what you're insinuating, how the last week basically is it's going to be the make or break game of their season. Solely because if Tennessee is going to continue their record, their progress they had from last year, if Ryan Tannehill continues to play, if he plays the same way how he did last year, that week 17 is going to be the game that knocks them out of the playoff race. Their season will be cut short early. Mm-hmm. If they don't buckle down and get things going. And continuing off of that, I still believe what you said earlier made a whole lot of sense. The week 1 and 2 games, they're going to be huge outliers of how well they're played during the season. But I see that week 3 game again at the Steelers. They're going to have to bounce back from adversity from those first 2 games, whether it's from injury, whether it's from getting beat badly, or whether the fact that they got outcoached. They're going to have to bounce back in some fashion in order to preserve their season and preserve their chance to even make the playoffs. Because if you can get a win out of those 3 games, just one win, you will be fine. But going 0-3, potentially 0-4 in the next week, because they do play against the Vikings as well, that may be a hole that they can't climb out of.
So I have the Houston Texans going 7-9. And I think it's a huge drop-off. I think they lose, instead of having those 3 games that they win and going 10-6 like they did last year, I think they go 7-9. I think most of these games are going to be a shootout with Deshaun Watson, and it's going to be pretty hard not having a valuable target at receiver. Mm-hmm. And I think the only reason why they're squeaking out 7 wins is because Deshaun Watson is an elite quarterback. Mm-hmm. And that he's elite, and it's just his front office and coaching staff just doesn't like it. I don't know. I don't know. That's neither here nor there, but they don't give him enough valuable weapons. I think as much as people talk about Dak Prescott, they should be talking about Deshaun Watson, because I think Deshaun Watson is an overall better quarterback than Dak Prescott.
Well, by far. It's not necessarily just about talent. It's more or less about the intangibles. Getting the wins when people don't expect you to actually win the game. You can't bank on that all the time, but the fact of the matter is, Deshaun Watson proved that he can get a win in a hostile environment with less talent compared to Dak Prescott. So I see the team going. They're definitely gonna fall. They're definitely gonna fall, especially having Will Fuller as the starting as the number one option. He gets hurt way too often. He gets hurt way too often to be a number one option. So I see them going at about 6-10. Now I'm not saying it's gonna be that big of a drop. There's gonna be other factors that lead into it. But as from what I can tell, looking at their season, they're gonna need some help, and certain players are gonna have to step up big just for them to make it, even give them a shot to make the playoffs.
So on to who I believe is going to win the division. No disrespect to your Colts, but I'm just saying. On to the Tennessee Titans. Who do you have? What outlier games do you have?
Tennessee, if you're looking at their schedule, they have the better schedule, the easier schedule compared out of everybody else in the AFC South. Mm-hmm. But I do believe that their biggest game, or not biggest game, their key game that they should want to circle down. They're gonna want to see that game against the Ravens in Baltimore. I believe that if any indication of last year is true, they're going to learn from their mistakes. They're going to learn from their mistakes They're going to learn from their mistakes. They're going to have better understanding of how Ryan Tannehill plays, and they're going to be more efficient. And that game against the Ravens is going to be a big indicator of that.
Yeah, I also have Week 5 versus the Buffalo Bills. I know people are still saying it's still Bill Belichick. You got to be Belichick, not just Brady, to win the division. And I understand it. Brady was, I think 20-3 versus the Buffalo Bills. But I think the Buffalo Bills have the best position to win their division. I know we're not talking about the AFC East, but I just think that if you want to be in the playoffs and you want to still make that playoff push, I think the first two spots are sewn up with the Ravens and with the Chiefs. So it's a fight for the third and fourth spot. If you want that home field advantage, I think you have to beat the Buffalo Bills Week 5.
Okay, and that's gonna tell a lot too. It's a good thing they're gonna. Well, it's not a good thing because they're going to Buffalo. It's gonna be
Buffalo at home.
Oh wow, God! I'm looking at the schedule right now, and I said the complete opposite.
It's cool.
Point of the matter is, the weather's not gonna be an issue. Especially for like throwing quarterbacks and stuff like that. Yeah, granted, Tennessee is a run-heavy team with Derrick Henry, so that's not going to be an issue. But being one-dimensional cannot be your go-to. Now, it worked for them last year, especially in the playoffs, because no defensive team could really tackle Derrick Henry in a one-on-one bout. That was on full display. But teams will start to load the box up. They're going to start to realize that if we want to win, we're going to have to force them to pass the ball. And that's one thing Buffalo do have. Buffalo has a good pass rushing defense. They're not going to just let you sit back there and throw the ball. So if they can be able to win in a multiple of ways, not just run heavy like how they showed in the past, then Tennessee should be able to walk out of that game. Tennessee should be able to walk out that game with a victory.
And then I think the final game of the season, like we said, is at Houston. So that's that third outlier game because, of course, if Houston has to circle it, y'all have to circle it as well as Tennessee because it's a must-win game for both teams, especially if Houston manages to squeak out some wins against some teams that they probably shouldn't have beat, and they're actually fighting for a playoff spot or they're fighting against the Colts. Like, okay, they go 1-1 versus the Colts, what are they going to do against each other too? I think so. What do you have Tennessee's overall final record be?
I have them doing better than they did last year. They went 9-7 last year, but I do see them taking an extra step. They get in at 10-6, and I'll even go a further step beyond that, and I say them they're going to get the 4th seed in the AFC playoff race.
4th seed.
Fourth
Okay,
seed.
I got them getting the 4th. I got them getting the 3rd seed, and I have them going 11-5. I have being the 4th seed. We'll talk about what we think the playoffs is going to be, but yeah, I have them going 11-5, and I have them making the playoffs, of course, and then I have the Colts being the wild card.
Yeah, show my team some love. All time.
Actually, and the way that it shakes out, because we get 7 teams now, there might be 3 teams from one division make the playoffs, and so I think it might be the Houston Texans might be that 3rd team, or it might be a 3rd team coming out of the AFC North.
That
Ravens.
Yeah, I see what you mean on that one. Actually was the last time that actually happened was actually came out of the AFC North as well. And instead of the Browns, who I assume that's who you're expecting to be that 3rd team, it was the Bengals actually.
Mm-hmm. So
granted, how long ago that was.
Yeah, but we'll just have to wait and see. So next week or later this week, depending on how we decide to record, the video will be up for you guys the following week. We're gonna get into how the actual NFL ruled this whole Rooney Rule, and then we're also gonna get into the NFC North and how that pans out. And then the following week after that, we're gonna go into the AFC North. So stay tuned for that. He started it. I'm gonna wrap it up. It's 2Brothers podcast. You can't really see me. My lighting's all off. But you really can't see me, son. This is crazy. Anyway, 2Brothers podcast signing off. Hope you guys enjoy. Like, comment, subscribe. Tell a friend to tell a friend. Share it. Repost it. All that stuff. Yeah, your good brother. Number uno.
Well, I always gotta do the outros.
You gotta have that. What's that say on the back?
That sounds like a team that's not gonna win the championship next year.
Is that Howie Kendricks? Did he put you guys out of the playoffs? Did he put you guys out of the playoffs? Huh?
We are signing off from 2Brothers podcast. Stay tuned for the next installment. Catch y'all later.
Peace.